Chosen one. For years, you believed the silence between you and your soulmate happened naturally. You believed distance simply grew with time. Until today. Someone has finally decided they can no longer carry the weight of what they did. Don't skip. Because the truth you're about to hear has been hidden for far longer than you realize. Listen carefully. There was a reason every conversation between you and your soulmate seemed to end before it truly began. Every message that should have reached you somehow disappeared. Every opportunity that should have brought the two of you together was quietly redirected. None of it felt obvious at the time. It simply looked like life was moving in different directions. That illusion was carefully created by someone who stood close enough to both of you to influence your paths without either of you noticing. They never believed the bond between you could be completely broken, so they settled for something else. They decided that if they could keep both hearts confused long enough, eventually both of you would give up. They counted on time becoming stronger than love. For a while, it seemed they had succeeded. Your soulmate questioned their own feelings. You questioned your own worth. Both of you spent countless nights wondering why every attempt to reconnect somehow failed. Yet behind every unanswered question stood a single person making quiet decisions that neither of you ever saw. They smiled in front of everyone while secretly changing the direction of two lives. Every small action looked harmless on its own, but together they formed a wall that neither of you understood. Don't skip. Because this wall is finally beginning to crack. The turning point came unexpectedly. The person who had hidden everything for so long started noticing something they never anticipated. Despite all the years, despite every distraction and every attempt to create distance, your soulmate never completely let go of you. Your name still appeared in unexpected conversations. Old photographs were never deleted. Certain places were still avoided because the memories were too powerful. Even during moments when everyone believed your soulmate had moved on, there remained a quiet sadness that no one could explain. Watching this became unbearable for the one who caused it all. Guilt has a strange way of growing louder with time. At first it whispers, then it refuses to stay silent. Every family gathering, every celebration, every conversation about the future reminded them of the choice they had made years ago. They realized they had not protected anyone. They had only created pain. Now, something has happened that they never expected. They have decided to tell the truth. But they are terrified because once the truth leaves their lips, nothing will ever return to the way it was. Relationships will change. Trust will be shattered. Hidden conversations will finally be exposed. Most importantly, your soulmate will discover that many of the painful conclusions they reached about you were never based on reality. Someone carefully placed those thoughts there. And the confession is much bigger than anyone is prepared to hear. The room became completely silent before a single word was spoken. No one understood why this person suddenly looked so nervous. Their hands trembled. Their voice refused to stay steady. Several times they tried to begin, only to stop again. They looked toward your soulmate with eyes filled not with anger, but with regret. Then, after carrying this burden for so long, they finally whispered the sentence they had feared more than anything else. Everything you believed about them was because of me. Don't skip. Because every second from this moment forward changes the story forever. No one reacted at first. The confession sounded impossible. Your soulmate stared in complete disbelief, waiting for the rest of the explanation. The person lowered their head and admitted that years ago, when they realized how deeply you and your soulmate cared for one another, they allowed fear to control every decision. They convinced themselves that separating the two of you would prevent future pain. At first, they only intended to delay a few conversations. They ignored one important message. Then another. After seeing that neither of you immediately questioned what had happened, they became bolder. They began changing the story each time either of you asked about the other. If your soulmate asked whether you still cared, they quietly answered, "They've already moved on." When someone asked you why your soulmate had become distant, another version of the story appeared, "They're happy without you now." Every lie sounded small. Every excuse felt believable. But those small lies slowly built an invisible wall between two hearts that were still searching for each other. As the confession continued, memories that had confused your soulmate for years suddenly began fitting together. They remembered waiting for replies that never came. They remembered hearing strange comments that never matched the person they truly knew. They remembered wondering why every attempt to reconnect seemed to end before it even began. None of those moments had been accidents. Someone had quietly stepped into the middle every single time. Phone calls were discouraged. Invitations were never delivered. Important conversations were postponed until they quietly disappeared. Even when mutual friends unknowingly tried to help, they were gently persuaded to stay out of it. The goal was never to create one dramatic separation. The goal was to create hundreds of tiny misunderstandings until both of you believed distance had become permanent. Looking back, your soulmate realized that they had never actually heard the truth from you. They had only heard someone else's version of it. The confession grew even heavier. With tears filling their eyes, the person admitted there was one moment they regretted more than anything else. One evening, your soulmate had finally decided to reach out directly. They had written a heartfelt message, ready to clear every misunderstanding and ask for one honest conversation. Before that message ever reached you, it was intercepted. Instead of letting hope find its way back, they convinced your soulmate to wait just a little longer, promising that the timing wasn't right. That delay became weeks. The weeks became months. The months became years. One single decision changed the direction of two lives. Since that day, they had watched both of you carry pain that never belonged to either of you. They admitted that every smile they forced in public hid a growing fear that one day the truth would finally come out. And now, that day had arrived. Your soulmate could barely breathe as every unanswered question from the past suddenly had an answer. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument. No one knew what to say next. But before anyone could respond, the person slowly reached into their bag and placed something on the table. It was an old envelope. Still sealed. Still carrying your name on the front. The room froze. Because everyone realized this was the message that should have changed everything years ago. The envelope rested silently on the table. No one dared to touch it. Your soulmate stared at your name written across the front. And in that single moment, years of confusion suddenly felt painfully real. Don't skip. Because what was hidden inside that envelope was never meant to stay hidden this long. For several long moments, nobody spoke. The person who had confessed stepped back as though they no longer had the right to stand near it. They quietly admitted that this letter had been written on the very day your soulmate finally decided to stop listening to everyone else's opinions and trust their own heart. It had never been written in anger. It carried no accusations, no bitterness, no blame. Instead, it contained something far more dangerous to the lies that had been told. It contained the truth. That was exactly why it had been hidden. The moment they read the first few lines years ago, they realized that if the letter ever reached you, every misunderstanding would disappear. Every false story would collapse. Every excuse they had created would lose its power. Fear overcame them, and instead of delivering it, they locked it away where they believed no one would ever find it again. For years they convinced themselves they had done the right thing. But every birthday, every holiday, every quiet evening reminded them that two people continued suffering because of one selfish decision. The guilt became impossible to silence. With trembling hands, your soulmate finally picked up the envelope. The paper had faded with time, but the handwriting was unmistakably familiar. Before opening it, they closed their eyes, almost afraid of what they were about to discover. The room watched in complete silence as the seal was slowly broken. Inside was a carefully folded letter, untouched since the day it had been written. The first sentence alone was enough to bring tears to your soulmate's eyes. If this letter ever reaches you, I hope you know that I never stopped believing in what we shared. Every line that followed erased another lie. The letter explained that you had never chosen distance. You had simply respected the silence because you believed your soulmate no longer wished to hear from you. It revealed that you had waited far longer than anyone knew, hoping for one honest conversation before finally accepting what you believed was their decision. There was no anger in your words. Only patience, compassion, and a quiet hope that someday the truth would find its way through the confusion. Your soulmate realized they had spent years grieving a version of the story that had never been real. As the final page was turned, another folded piece of paper slipped from inside the envelope and landed gently on the floor. Everyone looked at it with surprise. Your soulmate picked it up and unfolded it carefully. It wasn't part of the original letter. It was a small handwritten note. Written by the very person who had hidden the envelope. The date showed it had been written months after the letter was concealed. In it, They confessed that every passing day made them regret their decision, but fear of being exposed kept them silent. They had promised themselves they would reveal everything tomorrow. Yet tomorrow never came. Until now. Your soulmate looked up with tears in their eyes, not because of the years that had been lost, but because they finally understood that your love had never disappeared. It had simply been buried beneath someone else's choices. Then, just as everyone believed the entire truth had finally come out, the person whispered one final sentence that made the entire room fall silent. There is one more thing. I didn't hide only the letter. I also hid the reason why they were forced to walk away that day. The room fell into complete silence. Your soulmate slowly lowered the letter, unable to look away from the person who had just spoken. Everyone thought the confession was over. But it had only reached its beginning. Don't skip. Because the next truth explains the one moment that changed both of your lives forever. The person took a deep breath before speaking again. The day they walked away. It wasn't because they wanted to leave you. They were forced into a situation that I helped create. Those words struck everyone like lightning. Your soulmate's heart pounded as forgotten memories rushed back. They remembered that final day so clearly. You had seemed unusually quiet. You looked as though you wanted to say something important, yet every opportunity disappeared before a single honest conversation could happen. At the time, your soulmate believed your silence meant you had already made your choice. They never imagined someone had carefully arranged every moment to make it look that way. The confession continued. Meetings had been cancelled without your knowledge. Messages asking to meet had been deleted before they could ever be read. Even when both of you happened to be in the same place, someone always found a reason to separate you before the truth could finally be spoken. What appeared to be coincidence had actually been a carefully controlled pattern repeated again and again. The person admitted there had been one final meeting planned between you and your soulmate. It was meant to happen just before everything changed. On that day, your soulmate had already decided to ignore everyone's opinions and listen only to their own heart. They were ready to ask you every question directly. But before they could leave, someone deliberately gave them false information, claiming that you had cancelled the meeting because you no longer cared. At the very same time, you were told something equally heartbreaking, that your soulmate had chosen not to come because they had already accepted another future. Neither of you knew the other was still waiting. Both of you stood in different places believing you had been abandoned. The person lowered their head and whispered, "I watched both of you wait, knowing the truth. And I still stayed silent." Tears rolled down their face as the weight of that memory finally broke them. They confessed that the image of two people waiting for each other while believing they had been forgotten had haunted them every single day since. Your soulmate could barely hold back their emotions. Every painful memory now carried a completely different meaning. The disappointment they had blamed on you had never belonged to you. The silence they had mistaken for rejection had been manufactured by someone else's fear. They looked again at the old letter in their hands and realized that throughout all those years, your heart had remained far closer than they had ever believed. The distance had never been created by love fading away. It had been created by deception. Slowly, your soulmate stood up, wiped away their tears, and spoke with a calmness no one expected. If everything you've told us is true, then there is only one thing left that matters. The room held its breath. Your soulmate looked directly at the person who had confessed and asked, "Where are they? Right now?" The answer that came next made every person in the room freeze. Because the one who had hidden the truth revealed they had received a message from you just a few hours earlier. And they had never opened it. The room stood completely still. No one spoke. Every eye was fixed on the phone lying in the trembling hands of the person who had hidden the truth for so many years. Don't skip. Because one unopened message was about to change everything. With tears running down their face, they unlocked the phone and opened the conversation they had been too afraid to read. The timestamp showed it had arrived only a few hours earlier. Your soulmate could hardly breathe. Slowly, the message appeared on the screen. "I don't know why, but today my heart keeps telling me that the truth is finally coming out. If anyone has been carrying guilt because of what happened between us, tell them I forgave them a long time ago. Life is too short to keep living inside old mistakes. I never wanted revenge. I only ever wanted honesty. And if the person I once loved is happy, that alone is enough for me." The room fell into absolute silence. No anger. No accusations. No bitterness. Only grace. Your soulmate closed their eyes as tears rolled freely down their face. After everything that had happened. After every lie, every lost year, every broken promise. Your first words were forgiveness. In that moment, everyone understood why your presence had never truly disappeared from your soulmate's heart. Love built on truth had survived even years of deception. The person who confessed could no longer remain standing. They broke down completely, apologizing through uncontrollable tears. They admitted that every happy moment in their own life had been overshadowed by the memory of what they had done. They had tried to justify their actions, telling themselves they were protecting everyone, but all they had really done was steal years that could never be returned. Looking directly at your soulmate, they whispered, "If you hate me for the rest of your life, I'll understand. But please, don't lose another day because of my mistakes." Your soulmate slowly shook their head. "I can't recover the years we lost. I can't erase the pain. But I refuse to let another lie decide my future." Without saying another word, your soulmate picked up the letter, held the phone close, and walked toward the door. Every person in the room instinctively stepped aside. No one tried to stop them. For the first time in years, they were no longer chasing a memory. They were following the truth. As the door opened, sunlight poured into the hallway. At that exact moment, another notification appeared on the phone. "A new message from you. If our paths are ever meant to cross again, This time, let's promise each other one thing. No silence. No assumptions. Only the truth. Your soulmate smiled through tears. For the first time in years. It was a smile filled with hope instead of regret. Some stories end because people stop loving each other.